Hello and welcome to another edition of TVS Correspondent with me, Radzi Ahmad, and our correspondent all the way in Washington, D.C. in the United States of America, Alfian Zaidi. Alfian, it's great to see you again. How are you today?
I'm good. As you can see behind me, it's a glorious day here in Washington, D.C. I hope it's glorious as well for you guys in Kuching.
It is indeed glorious for us, but not as glorious as you with those cherry blossom trees. They look really, really beautiful. Well, let's jump right into this week's agenda. This week, the United States and Iran will be renewing talks on a nuclear agreement that was originally signed in 2015. The Iran nuclear deal, formerly known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, offered Tehran billions of dollars in sanctions relief in exchange for agreeing to curb its nuclear program. The agreement was aimed at ensuring that Iran's nuclear program will be exclusively peaceful. In return, it lifted UN Security Council and other sanctions, including in areas covering trade, technology, finance, and energy. Alfian, could you provide us with a brief history of the 2015 Iran nuclear agreement? What were the terms and what did Iran agree to?
Iran and a group of six nations led by the United States reached a historic accord in July 2015 to significantly limit Tehran's nuclear ability for more than a decade in return for lifting international oil and financial sanctions. The deal culminated 20 months of negotiations on an agreement that President Obama had long sought as the biggest diplomatic achievement of his presidency. An atomic bomb can be made from two types of radioactive materials, uranium and plutonium. The talks were aimed at curbing Iran's ability to put these two elements to use in weapons. To curb the uranium path, Iran has agreed to transform its deeply buried plant at Fordo into a center for research, for science research. Another uranium plant, Natanz, is to be cut back rather than shut down. Some 5,000 centrifuges for enriching uranium will remain spinning there, about half the current number. On the other hand, to curb the plutonium path, Iran has agreed to redesign and rebuild the Iraq reactor so it will not produce weapons grade plutonium. The original core of the reactor, which would enable the production of weapons grade plutonium, will be made inoperable but will stay in the country. Under the terms of the deal, the reactor's spent fuel, which could also be used to produce a bomb, will be shipped out of the country. Iran will not build any additional heavy water reactors for 15 years.
Could Iran realistically produce a nuclear weapon with its stockpile of uranium? And if so, how long would it take?
The deal requires Iran to reduce its current stockpile of low enriched uranium by 98% and limits Iran's enrichment capacity and research and development for 15 years. Some inspections and transparency measures will remain in place for as long as 25 years. Iran has also agreed to limit enrichment to 3.7% and to cap its stockpile of low enriched uranium at 300 kilograms or 660 pounds for 15 years. That is considered insufficient for a bomb rush.
Well, no matter what, it seems that the deal collapsed in 2018 during the Trump administration. What exactly happened, Alfian?
In May 2018, President Donald Trump announced that he is withdrawing the United States from the Iran nuclear deal, reneging on a landmark pact and raising fears that Tehran might respond by resuming its frozen weapons program. Trump further elaborated that he would impose the highest level of sanctions, which would affect not only Iran but other countries that do business with it. The Treasury Department said a series of primary and secondary sanctions, those affecting American and foreign partners of Iran, would go back into effect after wind down periods specified by law.
And how did Iran respond to this renegement of the deal?
For his part, Iranian President Hassan Rouhani responded then during that time that his country would remain engaged with the other signatories to the original deal.
Now it seems there's light at the end of the tunnel with the Biden administration now wanting to resume talks with Iran on the nuclear deal. What is the US aiming for in these talks, and what are the challenges that they face?
After weeks of failed starts and back channel exchanges, Iran and the United States will next week in Vienna begin exchanging ideas about how to restore the 2015 nuclear deal. Initially, though, there will be no direct talks between the two countries, officials in Europe and the United States said on Friday. In the talks in Vienna, during which American officials will be down the hall, while British, German, French, Chinese, and Russian officials meet with Iran, the discussion will focus on the nuclear steps that Iran will need to take in order to return to compliance with the terms of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. And that will be joined with discussion of the sanctions relief steps that the US would need to take in order to return to compliance as well. Sequencing the commitments to return both countries to the deal is complicated, partly because Washington and Tehran have insisted, both of them, that the other side make the first move. Republicans in Congress, who were overwhelmingly against the 2015 deal, along with some prominent Democrats, are already charging that the Biden administration is lifting pressure on Tehran too soon. Mr. Biden must be careful not to give Republicans in the Senate any sense that he is giving in to Iranian demands. And in Iran, there is little trust in the United States after Trump reneged on his predecessor's deal. Mr. Biden's successor, they note, could do just what Mr. Trump did.
Oh, thank you, Alfian. Let's hope the talks go smoothly for both nations and an agreement can be reached. We'll be right back after a short commercial break with US economy on the agenda. Don't go anywhere. All right, we're back on TVS Correspondent with me, Radzi Ahmad, and our correspondent in the US, Alfian Zaini. This time, we're jumping into the economic situation in the US, which is now on an upwards trajectory since vaccinations have begun. The US economy created the most jobs in 7 months in March as more Americans got vaccinated, and the government doled out additional pandemic relief money. What are the actual numbers, Alfian?
Non-farm payroll surged by 916,000 jobs last month, the biggest gain since last August. Data for February was revised higher to show 468,000 jobs created instead of the previously reported 379,000. Still, employment remains 8.4 million jobs below its peak in February 2020. All industries added jobs and many people rejoined the labor force. A measure of the economy's ability to create employment also improved. But the road to full recovery remains long. The jobs deficit is still huge, and more than 4 million Americans have been unemployed for more than 6 months.
Well, that's very good news indeed after a year of economic downturn for the US. What contributed to this job growth spurt?
Biden told reporters that the first 2 months of his administration has seen more new jobs created than the first 2 months of any administration in history. And it's a reflection of two things going on here. The first one being a new economic strategy focused on building from the bottom to the middle up, and one that puts government on the side of working people.
That's very good news. What other factors are at play here?
As of Friday morning, the US had administered 157.6 million doses of COVID 19 vaccines in the country and distributed 204.7 million doses, according to the US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC. On Friday, the CDC said fully vaccinated people could safely travel at low risk, which could help accelerate the services industry recovery. The Biden administration's massive 1.9 trillion pandemic relief package approved in March is sending additional $1,400 checks to qualified households and fresh fundings for businesses.
What are economists' expectations for this job growth in the future? Will it go on an upwards trajectory?
Economists expect job growth will average about 700,000 per month in the second and third quarters. That, combined with the fiscal stimulus and about $19 trillion in excess savings accumulated by households during the pandemic, is expected to unleash a powerful wave of pent-up demand. Some economists project job growth will top 1 million in April. Further out, economists surveyed by the Wall Street Journal project employers will add an average of 514,000 jobs each month over the next year, for a total of more than 6 million. That would mark the best 12-month stretch of job creation in decades, but leave overall employment totals below where they stood before the pandemic. Even with sustained hiring, industries, workers, and regions suffering the most from the pandemic still face lengthy recoveries. Those mostly dodging the downturn, better paid, more highly educated workers, and states that impose lighter restrictions are expected to return quickly to the strong economy that existed before the pandemic.
Well, that's all the time we have for now. Alfian, as always, thank you so much for your insight, and I appreciate the time you have for us. We'll be returning next week with another edition of TVS Correspondence. Till then, stay safe, and we'll see you again. Bye bye.